Coming up next on the Union Label will be a conversation with Ron Spann, retired staff representative for the United Steelworkers. Welcome back. I'm Barry Craig, and welcome to the program, Ron.
Thank you. Thank you, Barry.
Let's begin with the question I always ask guests, and that is this. It's a two-part question. What did the labor movement mean to you personally and to this country as a whole?
Personally, I just feel blessed that I had an opportunity to represent people for some 34 years. Actually, a union member for 42 years and staff member for 34 years. And just being able to meet thousands upon thousands of people and try to make a difference in their lives, that was probably the most gratifying thing I had in the years that I spent representing the membership, that I was with their help, always with their help, we were able to make a difference in their lives as well as the membership that they represented.
Mm-hmm. And in the country, what has labor, in your view, done for the country?
Well, I think economically, you go back when labor unions first started, you've seen the improvements in wages and working conditions, and you can still go around this country and you can find places that people are not being given the proper wages, they are not being given the proper benefits, and the companies are making money. That's probably, the contribution throughout this United States has been labor, no question. It made the middle class, the working poor, it lifted them up, and that's always been the most gratifying part that I've had in the labor movement.
Go back to the beginning. When did you first have a union card in your wallet?
Well, initially, out of high school, I went to work for the State Department of Kentucky as a draftsman, surveying draftsman, and I like to starve to death. I had an opportunity to go to Paducah shops. At that time, it was the Illinois Central Railroad, as a boilermaker. That was in 1967, and I remember what my starting wage was, $2.42.50 an hour. And that was twice what I was making at the State Department. So that was my initial start in the labor movement. I started as a steward, and went from steward to local chairman. And while local chairman, I was also secretary treasurer of my local. And
which union was that?
That was the Boilermakers, International Brotherhood of Boilermakers. Worked there in the shop for 8 years, and was approached by the International to come to work for them in 1975, and went to work for Boilermakers in 1975 as local chairman. As general chairman, as local chairman in the shop, general chairman. And then from there I went to director of railroad division in Kansas City, handled all of our railroad affairs for the whole United States, and was appointed assistant to the president there with Harold J. Bowie, who was the international president. Fine gentleman, old railroad man. And in fact, all of the international presidents of the Boilermakers had come from the railroad division up until 1981, I think.
Mm-hmm. Your first elected job with the union was steward. What makes a good union steward in your view?
Well, I used to tell everybody you had to be a very good listener. You had to sometimes be a psychiatrist. You had to be a doctor sometimes, or play that role, because people would come not only with the problems that they had in the shop, but they'd come with the problems that they had at home. And I just always thought if you was truthful with everybody, and if you just listen to them, you can usually help them through some of their problems. And of course, as far as the contract administration, you had to know the contract of the shop, and that was very hard in the railroad industry because those contracts did not expire; they just renewed. So you might go back to a contract that was written in 1942. And you'd have the amendments to it, over the years, but it never was rewritten. It was just renewed and amendments made to it. Mm-hmm. And then when you go on as general chairman, then I think I had 13 railroads at 19 different points in the United States. And different railroads had different agreements, of course, and that made it a little bit more. You had to really stay in those agreements.
So you were gone from home. Let's say of all the years you worked in the union movement, what percentage of time were you away from home, would you guess?
Well, for the first 30 years, I would probably average 14 days a month that I was out of town. And somebody asked, I was married to my wife, Glenda, for 44 years this year, working on 45. And they said, how did you manage those 44 years of marriage and I said, well, I was gone 30 of them. So, and that's what Glenda usually tells. But you spend a lot of time on the road, and then when you was home, the phone was answered. You was answering the phone or making callbacks. So it's a life that you got to dedicate to the labor movement, and everybody that's in the labor movement understands that. Most people don't. That you put your whole life into it. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Now, how many different unions have you belonged to?
Okay, let's see if I can walk through this. I've been through 5 different mergers with the Boilermakers from 1967 till 1987. And then there was a schism between 2 mergers, the Boilermakers and the Cement, Lime, and Gypsum. And off of that branched out the Independent Workers of North America. And at that time, I went with the Independent Workers of North America because I thought they were the group that was going to do the right thing for the membership. So the IWNA formed in 1987. Then we merged with the United Paperworkers International Union in 1991. After that merger, the Allied Industrial Workers in 1993 merged with us. Then in 1999, the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers merged. And what was then United Paperworkers became PACE International Union, Paper Allied Industrial Chemical Workers. And then in 2005, a merger was put together with United Steelworkers, and PACE merged with United Steel in 2005.
Mm-hmm. So how many members of the Steelworkers nationally do you have approximately?
750,000 was the last number I've seen. I'm sure we've had a little bit fall off because of the economy and a lot of the jobs that's going overseas. Our steel industry's been suffering. Our paper industry is beginning to suffer. We've been fortunate here. There's been very few people at West Vaco, or New Page now, mm-hmm. That's been laid off. Mm-hmm. In fact, the locals, when I retired, the locals that I'd serviced, I'd had no layoffs at that time.
Mm-hmm. We were talking earlier about union organizing drives that you participated in. Tell us about that.
Well, you hear a lot about the Employee Free Choice Act now, and there's so many misnomers and untruths on that. It's not just the signing a card and getting a union in your plant. I've been there in the trenches with it, and you see people fired because of trying to form a union in their plant for frivolous reasons. And I could tell you numbers of times. I had a paper mill in Memphis, Tennessee that we were trying to organize. We fired 7 people just right off the bat because they were union supporters. We went to an election, won the election overwhelming. And the board, the National Labor Relations Board, put these 7 people back to work because of they'd been unjustly terminated by the company. So we go to the election and won the election overwhelmingly. The company files objections to the election, and rather than go through all the 5 years of pending NLRB charges and hearings, we decided to go to another election. So we agreed to go to another election and beat the company worse that second time. Filed the same objections again. Fired people during that. Well, as it worked out, this company goes belly up. And we secured an employer from Canada that was interested in a paper mill in the United States. They came in, and the two HR guys, we explained that when we sat down to negotiate a contract, we had 7 people that were fired during the campaign. They said, we'll bring them back to work. The vice president of HR said, if we had done what was done in this campaign in Canada, said we would have been put in jail. Mm-hmm. That's the difference between the labor laws in Canada and the labor laws in the U.S.
They're weaker in the United States than any industrial democracy.
Absolutely. Then I had an opportunity to organize some flight attendants with, at that time it was Northwest Airlink, and which is Pinnacle Airlines now. And Lloyd Walters, who was the president down at West Vaco, New Page now, he had met one of these flight attendants on the plane, and she wanted to know how they could form a union. Of course, that's under the Railway Labor Act. A little bit different than under the National Labor Relations Act, but we met with these three ladies and had met with them about an hour and explained the process. And we had pulled our car in behind theirs at this lady's house, and she said, would y'all please move your car? We're going to go out and get these cards signed. Can you file a petition for us tomorrow? And I explained to her, I said, now, it's not going to be that easy to get these cards signed, but she said, yes, it is, too. Said, I'll have them signed tomorrow. Can you file a petition tomorrow? And I said, well, I tell you what, this is Thursday. Wait till Monday, and if you got the cards, we'll file a petition Monday. Well, Monday, they're sitting on our office steps. Out of 111 employees, they had signed up 104. And, of course, that kind of surprised Lloyd and I, and we started scrambling around to file a petition with National Mediation, which handles Railway Labor Act. And we had an election within 35 days. But going back to the meeting, I asked, as I normally do, I normally take a little survey as to what their wages are, what kind of benefits they have. And I asked one of the ladies that had been a 3-year flight attendant what her hourly wage was, and she told me $5.38 an hour. And I said, are you serious with me? She said, yes, that's what I make, $5.38 an hour. So I turned to the other lady who had been there 9 years. I said, what do you make an hour? She said, a little bit over $9 an hour. And the first thing I wanted to do was say, I want to apologize to y'all if I ever, in a flight, I said, you know, when are you going to bring our Coke by or something? Mm-hmm. You know, they was so underpaid. But the misnomer in that was they were only guaranteed 73 hours a month. So you're looking at $350 to $600 a month, that way below the poverty level. Now these people are flying today, and that's the small airlines. But we were successful in negotiating a contract with them that brought their wages up from 13 to about 21 bucks an hour. And that was one of the most gratifying campaigns I've been in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, again, going back to the Employee Free Choice Act, all the roadblocks that these companies can throw up to delay an election,
yeah.
and that's what this law would change.
Absolutely. And if you asked the general public, would they like to have a union, there's probably somewhere in the mid-60s would say yes. And of course, when you end up in a campaign, and under the National Labor Relations Act, they try to get it to an election within 40 days, and that doesn't happen. You know, time you run through the campaign, you might be 6 months before you get, you know, enough cards to sign and get all the hearings out of the way, and they'll object. You know, and some employers are not that way. I've had campaigns where I go in and we have a pact that neither one of us is going to attack each other, and then after the campaign's over, they'll tell you that we operate much better with a collective bargaining agreement because both sides knows where they are, you know what they can or they can't do, and I've had those. I had one right here in Paducah, H.B. Fuller. We had a little time getting the first contract, but I mean, we got to a quick election on it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of the things too, and we've talked about this before, is it seems young workers aren't as aware of the struggles that unions had to go through just to get organized. And I think in turn, that's why a lot of young folks don't go to union meetings, don't go to the area council. I've asked this question of lots of people, and the answer is really elusive, but any thoughts as to how to get younger members enthused about the movement?
I wish I had that answer, Barry, because I could probably travel this United States and make some pretty good sized bucks if I could come up with something to get people to come. People are so involved in so many different things now. I know when I first went to the railroad shop, there were 26 Boilermakers. There were 3 apprentices. And meeting night, there was 25 people there at that meeting. We had one member that worked out the South Yard, and he worked afternoons, so he couldn't come to the meeting. But it wasn't required that you be there, but just everybody wanted to be there. And when I started a railroad shop, I was 20 years old. Mm-hmm. And the other 2 apprentices, or maybe 3 apprentices.
So what do you think the difference is now? Because of a monthly union meeting, a typical union local, anywhere in the United States, you're talking a pretty small percentage turnout.
Well, most of the young members doesn't know the struggles that were behind them. They just see that the money's good. They come right into a union shop that didn't have to go through an organizing campaign. Our forefathers fought hard for that. Some of them give their lives, you know. Mm-hmm. We think, I think about I give a lot of time, but we had some people that give their lives mm-hmm. when the labor mm-hmm. movement started. And mm-hmm. I always try to tell, I'll go to a retirees banquet or something, and we'll have our young members there too. And I'll just tell them, I said, guys, you need to look at all these guys. They're the one that what you got today, they work for it.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I've talked to union officials, you get a kid who, well, it's your case where you get this really good, terrific salary, and you go to work at this place, and of course the company leads the employee to believe that this is the company giving you this out of the goodness of their heart. This is why you've got good wages, why you've got good benefits, good hours, education program, and they don't really understand the union is what did that. Should unions do a better job of explaining to new employees
what
unions do?
In our organization, we have what's called a new membership booklet, and it may start with the history of that international. In the locals, they will put contracts that goes back number of years, and that is to show those young people that those wages were not always there, those holidays were not always there, that overtime payment was not always there. Mm-hmm. I mean, you go back when unions first formed, they was working you as many hours as they wanted to mm-hmm. at a low wage, and there was no overtime included
right.
in it.
A typical factory work week was 12 hours a day, yep. 6 days a week, and no overtime at all. No pensions, no safety laws, all of this, but again, I just wonder how many young people are aware of that.
Well, we probably don't do as good a job that we should do in educating our young members, but all the locals that I was privileged to service over the years, they usually had steward training, and they'd invite the new members in. If they wasn't even stewards, try to get them involved, and a lot of them would get involved. And I'm at the other end of the spectrum now on labor movement. But when I first started, I tried to be at every meeting, tried to be involved in everything that was going on in the local, and we had a very active local at the shop.
But there again, what motivated you? It's obviously something that's not motivating a lot of young people today, because I know people who work at plants who have the most casual connection to the union. It's just something they do. And in other words, I've heard it said there are union members, and then there are union movement members.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference.
Well, probably mine, a lot of the drive was a desire to do better for myself as well as other people, help other people along. But I also had family. I had, my dad was a machinist at the Paducah shop, my great uncle, my grandfather, my uncle, they were carmen with the Carmen organization. My dad was a machinist apprentice. And he eventually went on to Lindsay's Funeral Home, worked there all his life. But I guess it was family oriented that be part of the labor movement.
So there were several unions in that shop.
Yes, there was 7. Well, there were 6 different unions, 7 different crafts. I had the Boilermakers and blacksmith. There was machinists, the carmen, the firemen, oilers, the electrician, and I think I named them all. But we worked as a group, and Paducah shop was a lot of labor leaders come out of that shop. We had 4 that come out of the Boilermaker shop that I can recall. Carson Bagwell was the first one. Carson's been dead for 30 years and probably was the guy that was responsible, not probably, he was the guy responsible for me going on staff, and I didn't know it till I went to his funeral. I had a guy tell me, he said, there's the guy that recommended you to staff. And then we had Pat Mary come out of Paducah shop, Tommy Grooms, and then myself out of the Boilermakers. And Bob Reynolds, I know you know Bob.
Oh, sure.
He come
He's
out
on
of
the program.
He come out of the machinist. Vernon Niehoff out of the electrical workers, and I don't know why, but Paducah shop probably had more international people come out of it.
You also, of course, W.C. Young came out of the Paducah shop.
That's right, and I'd go back a long time with W.C. We met at the old Carpenter's Hall there at 7th and Washington, and I remember some things that W.C. and Bill Sanders told me. I'd be down there working on books as a financial secretary, and they give you some good advice back then. And I remember W.C. said, son, just always be truthful with everybody. And I tried to do that all through my labor career.
Of course, Bill Sanders, gosh, at one time he was the oldest active union officer in the United States. And if memory serves, Bill and the building trades were exactly the same age, the Paducah building trades. They were both way up in their 90s at the time. What do you see as the future of the labor movement? With steel, for example, a lot of this industry has gone overseas, outsourcing jobs, outsourcing plants. Mayfield, the General Tire plant, which they're now demolishing piece by piece.
Well, I think that was a place that was headed down the wrong road anyway, not far as the labor side of it, but you get all the foreign tires coming in here, and those companies going foreign too. Now, we were able to put a halt on a lot of the imports coming in from China on tires, and the same thing with paper. We've been involved in legislation. I know International President Leo Gerard has been very active in Washington in the flooding of paper products into the U.S. from China, illegally harvested wood, even some of our wood being shipped over there, and paper made and coming back here. So I know that's been an issue. Steel, same way. You've got a number of steel companies over in China and shipping it back here cheaper than what we can get the raw material for. So,
going back to the Mayfield plant, Wayne Chambers, of course, who you know was the last vice president of the plant, and he said, they told them, their local 665, that we want to build cheaper tires overseas, but yet the tires that are being sold to the American consumer are not cheaper.
That's right. It's a cheaper product, no question, because you can look at the wear that you get out of that China tire, and we even had some issues, I think, with tires that was being put on Ford Motor products. We had some crashes as a result of those tires, and
you look at in a lot of foreign countries, there are no environmental laws, safety laws. I was talking to a fellow over the weekend who worked at the Colgate plant in Louisville, and it went to Mexico, and they're having a problem there with water purity to make toothpaste, things like that. But again, it's just what they want to increase is profit, not lower the cost to the consumer.
Funny that you would mention the water products. I can go back into the 78, 79, somewhere in that area. Got an opportunity to go into the maquiladoras. And that was when a lot of they passed the legislation where it would split the product being made in Mexico, and then at that time most of it was coming back into Texas. What they said it'd be equally divided. Well, the division was that the product and all the people that built the product was in Mexico, and the only thing that was in the U.S. was the warehouses, which was, as we know, maybe a tenth of the numbers was at the warehouse. But anyway, we got to go in and visit some of those families that were working in a lot of the big major manufacturers that had went to Mexico. And most of the employees were 13, 14-year-old girls. And they'd work them up to 20, and they'd hire new ones. We met this man that was living right there on a drainage ditch, and his daughter worked at his electrical manufacturer, and they had tapped onto the water line there at that facility, run it underground over to into the maquiladoras. And this one hut that they were gathering drinking water for all the people there, and there's a number of people. And his little 13-year-old daughter was working in this facility. But anyway, they'd all come to this one hut to get the water. And it was in a 55-gallon barrel. On the side of that 55-gallon barrel was crossbones. And we asked him, where'd he get the barrel? And they said, well, they told us if we'd take that barrel full of whatever was in it and dump it, we could have the barrel. So you know it was some toxic.
Sure.
And that's where they were catching their drinking water in that barrel.
And it's sad, not only are the American workers exploited in this, but the foreign workers are exploited.
Absolutely.
So workers get exploited on both ends of this.
That's right.
We're out of time. We'll have to come back in and talk some more. I enjoyed this. My guest today was Ron Spann of the United Steelworkers. I'm Barry Craig. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.